saw this man was about 31 or 2 years ago.
31.
31 years ago, when I was lucky enough to... Hot as Flowers did a few shows with Dire Straits in Australia. So my first impression of John was this tall figure with his bass guitar pinning down the rhythm and the lower end of this incredible band at the time. And there we were, young pups, coming to Australia and getting the opportunity to open up for John. And it's great to see you again.
It's good to see you too. I mean, it brought back some memories, when the idea of you and I having a conversation. Because I think we did speak on tour, but not very much.
We did, but not very much.
Not very much. But it was a great lineup, actually. I thought we worked well together.
I remember we had lunch with Mark one day, and you may have come in at the tail end of it, but he was giving us very sound advice. He said, stick with this. It's really worth all the hardship.
It might be all right in the end.
It might be okay in the end, exactly.
Well, that's a true word. I mean, you've got to love this business in order to survive it, really. I think that's the secret. And you obviously love it as much as I do.
Absolutely. I mean, it's can't imagine doing anything else, really.
Well, it's the only game in town as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's kept me out of trouble. Well, actually got me into a bit of trouble occasionally, but...
While we're talking about Australia, I mean, while you say music is the only game in town, it actually isn't the only game in town for you in terms of creativity, because you met a man in Australia who I think was quite instrumental in your painting world.
Yes, well, I was fortunate enough to meet a chap called Brett Whiteley in 1981, I think it was, the first time we went to Australia. And Brett Whiteley was, to my mind, I would call him the Picasso of Australian art. He took enormous amounts of risks. And his only problem was he was off and on heroin addict, which was problematic for him and for the people around him, of course. But I got very friendly with him because he rang me at the Siebel Townhouse in Sydney. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Sydney. And the Siebel Townhouse was the rock and roll hotel. And he's laughing.
Stayed there as well.
It's a fantastic, one of the best hotels in the world.
It is. Sadly no longer there.
No, I think it got turned into a block of flats like most things in life these days. He rang me in the Siebel Townhouse and he said, do you like art? And I said, I said, I do. Who is this? And he said, my name's Brett Whiteley. Would you like to come and look at some pictures? And so I literally went to his studio, and it turned out he was a great lover of music as well. So he then tagged on. He did the whole tour with us around Australia, I think 3 times. 81, 85, and then on the one that you guys are on as well.
Yeah.
You
know the live record, that incredible live Dire Straits double album, Alchemy, which I remember looking at with I think I was 15 and my brother was 13, and we had this at home, and we used to ceremonially, put it on and stick our heads between the speakers and bathe in it, literally. Such an incredible live record. But it was only through reading your book that I realised that the artwork on that book is your friend Brett.
That was Brett. Yeah. He changed he added a few things to it to make it relevant to us. And I mean, he was a great friend of Mark's as well. I mean, we had a pretty good relationship with him all around. He taught me a lot about my entrance into painting as well, because that's what I did when the band stopped in 92.
Okay.
I wanted to fill that vacuum that existed after 16 years of madness. And I thought, well, I'll be a painter. Which is an extremely arrogant thing to do, of course. But
had you painted at all? Had you had an interest?
I'd painted a bit, but nobody had said they liked anything. So basically, you're not really a painter until somebody says, "I'll buy one of those." Well, you can be, but in a sense, you need recognition. I think for whatever you do in life, you need the feedback.
Yeah.
And it took me about 8 years before a gallery would say, "I'll do a show with you." So,
but you've done a number of shows now.
I've done a few now. Yeah. I've been resting a bit recently because I've been to. I wrote this book, of course, and then did my 8th solo album during lockdown. So I was quite busy during lockdown. I had plenty of time on my hands, and of course, creative people need that.
Yeah, Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about the book. We were at the Festival of Writing and Ideas. Had you, in the back of your mind, all those years ago, thought you might write a book someday, or was it something that just came out of the blue?
Sort of came out of the blue slightly, but I was doing these shows a few 2 or 3 years ago before lockdown, called The Life and Times of Dire Straits, where I chatted like we are now, and then we'd play a few songs, then chat a bit more and play a few songs, and got just doing it acoustically, taking all the Dire Straits songs back to the basics again. And I found myself sitting next to a lady at a charity event in my local hometown, and she turned to me during supper and she said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I said, "That's a very strange question to ask." She said, "Well, I saw your show a couple of weeks ago and I think you should write this down." And I said, no. She said, "Well, if you change your mind," she gave me a card. And of course I thought about it and I thought, hang on, we've got lockdown going on here.
Right.
This is a perfect opportunity to revisiting it. It was quite interesting actually going back.
I bet.
Over everything.
Had you kept diaries or journals or anything like that along the way?
No.
So you had to dig pretty deep then?
Yes, but the interesting thing is, when I started thinking about it, a lot of stuff came flooding back. I was surprised how much I remembered. There was a few things I forgot, so I had to go back onto the internet. Thank God for the internet.
Yeah.
And check a few dates out. And
yeah.
I really enjoyed the process. It was very hard work. It was much harder than writing an album. I've got it much harder.
Yeah.
Putting all the stuff down and making sense of it. And I did it chronologically, as you know, because that was the only way I thought I could possibly do it and get away with it.
It's full of such great detail, including a happy childhood.
Yeah, I would say a secure childhood.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this recently because somebody asked me, how did your childhood, you think, influence your, the band and being in the band and all the rest of it? And I think I came from a very, dare I say, disciplined childhood, quite Victorian sort of way of approaching the world. Didn't take any risks. And I was the risk taker in the family, as it turned out. That's how I ended up doing this and how I ended up speaking to you now.
Yes. Yeah. That's a huge risk. Was it I guess the type of childhood which was one from which at a certain point you wanted to escape from?
I think I found it emotionally bereft. So I needed something that made me feel alive. And as soon as I heard Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry and the Stones and the Beatles, which of course is what I grew up with in the late 50s, early 60s, I thought this is speaking to me in a way that nothing else was. And so I found myself picking up a guitar and trying to play it, which of course in those days you could only afford cheap guitars and with the actions like this, these are a dream. If I had one of these, I'd have felt like God. But anyway, that's the way we all start.
Yeah.
And but the language of music sort of did something inside me which I didn't experience in my family. It was a very loving family, but it wasn't sort of emotional. There was something else that I needed out of that.
You describe a moment in the book where your parents came to see Dire Straits at, I think, was it on the Brothers in Arms tour?
Yeah.
Had they been to see you before then?
No, they hadn't actually.
That's amazing.
They were retired then, and they were travelling through France to go down to have a holiday. And we were in the northern France, and they joined us on the road. And I remember this image of them sitting on the side of the stage, drinking tea that which one of the roadies have made for them while we were playing. And this is a retired bank manager and his wife, right, sitting there in their collapsible chairs, those camping chairs, with cups of tea, and with big grins on their face. And I thought, because when I said I was joining a rock and roll band and giving up work, and because I worked for a living for 3 years, which I thought was quite good.
You were quite enterprising, actually, weren't you? When you worked at the timber company.
Yeah, I was quite good at it.
Yeah,
but it wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I left the timber company and went to university. And okay, the reason why I'm talking about this is because I see life as a series of coincidences and consequences of your actions. So doing the timber thing taught me a lot about the everyday man, because all the strikes were going on in the yards at that time with the dockers. Mm-hmm. So I got a view from a middle-class lad up in Leicestershire. I got a view of a different kind of life. And that made me interested in politics and social issues. So I ended up packing the job in and going as a late student to Goldsmiths College in South London. And if I hadn't gone to Goldsmiths College in South London, I'd never got the council flat in Deptford, and I would never have met the Knopfler brothers, because David became my flatmate, and then Mark moved in, and we started playing guitar together. So that's one action that I made, created another reaction, and then that really was how I got into the band playing with Mark.
Describe to me the moment you first met Mark. It's in the book. It's great.
Well, I had a very late night, or actually very early morning, if you like, and I'd had quite a good night out, and I came in at about 8 o'clock in the morning to the flat and went into the kitchen to make some tea, and I suddenly realised there was a body lying on the floor in what we call the sitting room, but in fact, actually, it was a concrete floor with one chair in it, and this body had its head in the chair, leaning back, fast asleep, with a red guitar lying over his chest.
It's classic, yeah.
Fast asleep, next to an ashtray full of butts and a few empty cans of, I was going to say Newcastle Brown, but I think it was just ordinary beer. And I looked at it and I thought, that's a bit weird. And I suddenly realised, looking at him, that he was not the spitting image of David, my flatmate, David Knopfler, but obviously
you could see
looked like him. Yeah. Looked like him. So I realised this was the brother he was talking about, who turned up unannounced and just fallen asleep on the floor with a guitar across his chest. And so I made a cup of tea and made a bit of noise, and he woke up and his eye sort of unstuck like that, and we started chatting, and I realised straight away that I was going to know this man for a long time. I just knew it, instinctually felt a sort of warmth towards him, which was quite wonderful, actually, and still exists to this day.
That is the remarkable thing that I took from this book, because it's a great adventure, the adventure of this incredible band, Dire Straits, who toured the world, became the most successful band in the world for quite a long time. And then, like so many bands, broke up. It stopped. But the friendship never stopped.
No. Well, I don't think friendship should stop.
No, but people fall out. I mean, look at the Gallagher brothers.
No, we didn't manage to do that. I think we had one crossword in the studio about something. It lasted about 20 seconds. That was it. In 40-odd years or whatever it is, I've known him now.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, no, it was a good partnership, and we were very strong together. I think sometimes that's the secret of a successful band, is that people know their roles in the band. And because I'd come from quite a disciplined household, I was quite disciplined with the Knopfler brothers, which was quite necessary on occasions, especially in the early days when you're sharing a flat with them. You know about the dynamics of a rock and roll band as much as I do. So
Well, on that very tour in Australia, somebody turned around to me and said, "You see him, John? He's the one who does your kind of role in the band. He's the one who sort of is a bit organised about things."
Well, somebody has to do it. Yeah. And I wasn't writing at that particular point in time. I started writing a lot later.
Right.
And as a consequence of working with Mark, I learned a lot about songwriting. And that stood me in good stead, I think, and still does to this day.
Were you writing during the Dire Straits period, or did that?
Well, I wrote an album in '84.
Yeah.
That was the first one, and then another one after the Brothers in Arms tour. I did another album then, and then there was a huge break until I did Streets of Heaven in 2009, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So that was I hung the bass up on the wall after that On Every Street tour, which you were on.
Yes.
And I didn't really want to look at it until Paul Brady rang me up one day and said, "Would you come and do Jules Holland?" And I went, "Paul, I haven't touched the bass for about 5 years." And he said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, "We'll keep it fresh." That was his... I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We'll just play it a couple of times, you'll be fine."
There's a great moment, I'm just reminded of a great moment in the book where Paul Brady opens for you in Italy.
Oh my God!
I mean, there was one tour in particular that stands out where you were doing gigs that were, I think, kind of challenging in terms of crowd control and crowd behaviour and all of that.
Yeah,
and there's Paul Brady opening for you in Italy. Tell us a bit about that.
Well,
he pulled it out of the bag.
Some people here might know Paul Brady, but he's a pretty courageous character, and we were playing in front of a lot of people in Italy. I think the smallest one was 35,000 people or something. The biggest one was the Turin football stadium, which was full. So they reckoned about 100,000 people were there. And Paul Brady went on his own on the stage in front of 100,000 people. And the fans in front of the stage, the Dire Straits fans in front of the stage, took their clothes off and set fire to them in between where the goalpost would be. And there was Brady sort of shouting at him. He said, "I'm going to fucking play for you lot, whether you like it or not." I told my wife I would never try and speak Irish. Anyway, so
do it again.
He literally shouted them down.
Yeah.
And in the end, he pulled them round. 100,000 people. It was extraordinary. I mean, he had real nerve. It was wonderful to watch. And he did that every night. Yeah.
Paul Brady, good man, Paul.
He's still at it, I think.
Yeah, he's just released a beautiful record.
Yeah.
Called Maybe So. But,
no, he's a very talented man. Very talented.
He's amazing. The book caused me to relive. There's so many things about being in a band there's so many parallels. You know, there's the early days of playing. You describe making your own instruments. And your first bass guitar you called it the Spade. It was a 2-stringed thing, wasn't it, or something like that? And then, crude amplification. I remember getting a present of it was a sort of like an electronics kit from my parents, and you could make a crystal radio.
That's right.
In it.
Yeah.
And there was an earphone. And I discovered that if you reversed the wiring on the earphone and put one little bit of cable here, and it turned into a microphone. And I then discovered that if I sellotaped that to my mother's classical guitar and put it through the Bush stereo, the old Bush record player, and turned it up really loud, you were approximating something like, something electric.
Distortion, yeah.
Yeah.
1 watt of uncontrolled power.
Exactly.
Yeah. From a Bush radio set. I think quite a few of us did that. But we built everything in those days. We had to. We hadn't got any money.
Yeah.
I mean, everything happened in the woodwork shop.
But then your granny left you some money.
She left me some money. She left me 500 quid, which when the rent for the flat was £9.48. That was a lot of money then. And
what did you do with the 500 quid?
Well, the band at that point in time was playing quite regular gigs in London, and we had about 5 or 6 songs. Mark had written 5 or 6 songs, which we were playing regularly. So I ended up, and I said, "Oh my God, I've just been left 500 quid." And everybody said, "We've got a really good idea for that, John." I said, "What's that?" "Well, let's go and spend it on recording the songs." And I went, So we did. We went to Pathway Studios in North London, spent a weekend there, which cost about 450 quid for the weekend. And that was the tape that was played on Radio London, Sultans of Swing, which Charlie Gillett played. And he said, "I'm going to play this until one of you record company guys out there picks this band up."
And that kickstarted.
Which they did, yeah. So that was our kickstart. Was the 500 quid from Granny, and which I got back, by the way. The band did when the first royalty check came in, I got that back. Yeah,
that's fair.
Well, it was the deal.
Fair enough.
That was the deal. I said, if we make any money out of this, I'd like it back. And they said, "Yeah, okay."
Amazing.
But Charlie was the one that really ignited the situation for us.
So how long after that did you go on tour with Talking Heads?
That was
a couple of years.
78, wasn't it? Yeah, actually, it was before the first album came out.
Yeah.
Ed Bicknell, who was our manager at that time, was also looking after the Heads. They're touring. I think he was working for NEM's agency, and he said this would be a great thing for you to do. Go out with Talking Heads because they've got some audiences that you've only got about 5 people coming to your gigs. So,
right.
And suddenly we were playing in front of 400 or 500 people, which was quite nerve-wracking. Going from the Hope and Anchor with 50 quid in it, I mean 50 people in it, and less than 50 quid, and playing in front of big university crowds.
And did you all travel together in the one van? Is that
we were in a transit van, and
the 2 bands?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was February.
Yeah.
And guess where the main act was sitting? Next to the heater in the front.
Right.
And we were in the back. But they were really great to us. We had a really lovely time.
I could imagine that was a great combination.
It was a great combination. I mean, David is a little unusual. And so we got
David Byrne now, not David Knopfler.
Well, he is as well. No, but David Byrne was unusual and more difficult to communicate with, but he was but a very generous spirit. They actually gave us sound checks, which actually, if anybody in the music business is here, you know, getting a sound check out of the main act, if you're a support act, is not easy.
It's rare.
Just get on and do what you do, you know.
Well, we haven't done a sound check here today, have we?
No, we haven't. It's been a bit nerve-wracking, this is now.
Should we play a song?
What do you want to play?
Do you know what what would you like to hear? Romeo and Juliet. She'd like to hear Romeo and Juliet. Anybody else like to hear Romeo and Juliet? All right.
Have you tuned this?
Yes, I believe it was tuned. I didn't tune it, so it's probably in tune. I hope I tuned this.
Oh, so it is. Okay.
Now.
Sound about right?
Does that sound okay? Great.
Okay, now we've played this twice together. First time
Ever.
It's the first time you've played it, isn't it?
Listen, the last 2 weeks I've been sitting in my studio at home with YouTube tutorial videos of how the hell do you play Romeo and Juliet. I mean, Mark Knopfler, he's a guitar genius, I'm not. So I'm going to give it a sort of a ham-fisted approximation.
But also, I'm a bass player, so you've got to, you have to forgive me if I make it the odd...
Anyway, what a beautiful song.
So if I start it and then you join in when you feel like it, and then we'll... Okay, all right. Okay, man, go. Love-struck Romeo sang a street song serenade, laying everybody low with a love song that he made. Found a street light, stepped into the shade, said something like, "You and me, babe, how about it?" Juliet says, "Hey, it's Romeo. They give me a heart attack. He's underneath the window. Hey, love, my boyfriend's back. You can't come around here singing up to people like that. Anyway, what you gonna do about it?" Well, Juliet, the dice was loaded from the start, and I beg, you exploded into my heart. I forget. Know the movie song. When you're gonna realize it was just that the time was wrong. Juliet. Come up on different streets, both the streets of shame. They're both dirty, both mean, but the dream was just the same. And I dreamed your dream for you, and now your dream is real. How can you look at me as if it was just another one of them deals, when you can fall for chains of silver, fall for chains of gold, fall for pretty strangers, and the promises they hold. Well, you promised me everything. You promised me thick and thin. Now you just say Romeo. Yeah, I used to have a scene with him. Juliet, when we made love, you used to cry, but I love you like the stars above. I love you till I die, and there's a place for us. You know that movie song. When you're gonna realize it was just that the time was wrong. Juliet. Now I can't do the talking,
talk on the TV, and I can't do a love song the way it's meant to be. I can't do anything, but I'll do anything for you. Can't do nothing except be in love with you. All I do is miss you, the way we used to be. All I do is keep the beat and bad company. All I do is kiss you through the bars of a rhyme. Julie, I do the stars with you anytime. But Juliet, when we made love you used to cry. But I love you like the stars above. I love you till I die, and there's a place for us. You know that a movie song, when you're gonna realize it was just that the time was wrong. Juliet.
Thank you very much.
What a song.
Well,
What a song that is. What a pleasure. What an absolute pleasure to play that with you, John. Thank you.
well, can you imagine hearing that for the first time?
Yeah.
He came round to my house in South London with a National Steel, you know, the 1928 National Steel, which is on the cover of Brothers in Arms
Yes.
album. And we were just chatting. He said, I've got a song, you know, you might like to hear. And he started playing Romeo and Juliet. I just looked at him and I went, my God, that's 5 chords. That's the most beautiful thing you've written so far. You know, it stood the test of time, I think.
Totally. I mean, what a writer, though, you know? I mean, yeah, I mean, when he went away on holidays, didn't he, after? Was it after the Communicate tour? It was a bit of a break.
Yeah, it was
and
before making movies. Yeah, obviously before making movies.
And he
yeah.
came back with that song and others.
Yeah, and others, yeah. A very creative period that was. I was always constantly surprised about what he was going to come up with next, you know. And then when we were doing the Making Movies album, there was a lot of collaboration between us all. And he always came with the lyrics. Mark always had the lyrics because he made sure that was right. And sometimes the genesis of the song, but then, like you guys, you would sit around and you would, you know, work it up to where it became a Straits thing, you know.
Is there a particular album or recording situation that stands out as being, you know, the one? You know, you know, I'm sure they were all remarkable and all in quite different locations. You recorded in London, you recorded in the Caribbean, you recorded quite a lot in New York as well.
Yeah, we used the power station a lot. I think that I would see them all as a unique experience. So the very first one is always very special, as you know,
Yes.
from your own experience. But the first time you ever hear your band being, you know, recorded in a proper studio, a grown-up studio, which was Basing Street Studios, which was you know, with Muff Winwood from Spencer Davis Group recording us, and to hear your music coming back through proper speakers and you know, proper desk was a thrilling experience. And then Communicate was a different thing, and everyone had its own place in time. It's very difficult to say which one stood out. Obviously, everybody talks about Brothers in Arms because that was a biggie, you know, and it's always difficult to follow something like that. And in fact, you should never worry about following it. And we didn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually thought that at the end of Brothers in Arms, we probably might, you know, stop.
Right.
And was surprised when Mark and I were having lunch one day and he said, I think I've got some songs that the Straits should do.
Yeah.
And I went, really? Because he was doing a lot of solo stuff then and film music. And then we ended up going into the studio for 6 months.
Wow.
The first record took 3 weeks.
But there's no doubt that your sound also it widened and it became, you added lots of different elements to it as time progressed.
Yeah, well, I
as
think
well.
it grows as you grow as a band. You want to investigate more ideas, sounds, instruments, complexities of rhythms and such like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's natural.
Yeah.
But I kind of knew Brothers was probably going to be the last hurrah, if you like. So
talk to me a bit about when you started writing yourself. Was there a moment where you kind of said to yourself, because I remember this happening to me, where it was, you got to stand on your own 2 feet at some point. I've got to start writing my own songs. And was that kind of what happened to you?
I didn't really feel it that way. I found myself writing things down, just ideas for songs, I actually working on I taught myself how to play the piano, very rudimentarily, by the way. I'm not a piano player. But I found that actually just knowing a few chords, I found writing on the piano easier than on the guitar.
Right.
Although, as you can tell, I play that quite rudimentarily as well. But, I never wrote anything on the bass guitar, which is really my instrument. So I was writing on the piano, and I just found that different ideas were springing up. I think when I was away from the Straits, I tended to think more about that than anything else. Was actually not trying to stand on my own 2 feet so much as just actually, I'd learnt a lot from Mark, as I said earlier, but I just had different ideas going around in my head, which were different from what we were doing with the band. And I mean, this latest album is my 8th solo album, and not many people know that.
That's amazing.
I know. But I do one every couple of years, really. That's the way I work. And I don't quite know how they come together. I'm jotting things down. Now, thank God, with the iPhone, you can sit watching the telly and you think of a good idea, put the iPhone on, and then there's all this jigsaw puzzle to put together, and it's weird.
Yeah.
And I still don't know how it happens. It's
Do you
a
save
mystery.
voice notes or type things?
Exactly, yes. I'm driving the car and I think of a lyric, and I'm driving. I shouldn't be doing it, of course.
Yeah, I don't do that at all. Of course I do. On the way here.
Who knows where it comes from?
Yeah.
I think Noel Gallagher said he waits for things to drop out of the sky into his lap. I thought that was quite interesting. I'm not quite sure how that happens.
There's an emotional range on this, because I was listening to driving down here today, I listened to your most recent record, and there's some very personal songs. There's some songs that you could tell they came out of the last couple of years. And then there's some songs that talk about the state of the planet, which I know is something that's important to you as well.
Well, I think it's important to most of us, isn't it? I mean, I think as artists, and I use that in a very broad sense, whether a painter, writer, musician, you feed off what's around you. And I think we're all very aware of what's going on with the world right now. Some of it is pretty disastrous. Some of it's wonderful. I mean, but I think we try and reflect what's going on out there in our own words. Sometimes it's complete rubbish when you write it down, and sometimes you get a good idea. It's a bit like a painting. You're using a different voice. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a writer, even though I've written this. I'm not an author. That's an autobiography. That's just that's my story, the way that I told it, the way I remember it. Somebody else in the book might remember it very differently. But I think we reflect what's around us. I mean, I think that's what writers do. That's what musicians do.
There was a song that obviously came from writing the book, if I'm not mistaken, which is Looking Back.
Yeah. That's a long way back. Yeah. Well,
how did that come about? Did that? Was it due to writing the book, or had that?
Funny if it was, because the album was written during lockdown.
Yes.
There wasn't much else to do, if you remember. Nobody talked to each other. We just went into our own cocoons. I felt. And I was reflecting on, as I was writing this, I was also reflecting on how the band started and where it all started. And it's a long way back. Should we play it?
Okay.
Let's
do it.
So this has got a slight feel of Sultans about it, so I apologise for that. But it is a reflection of the very early days of the band and meeting Bob Dylan and playing at the Roxy in LA and all that kind of stuff, which is really what it's all about. Okay. But this is the third time we've played it, by the way, so be prepared, okay? Well, this is, yeah, okay, right.
City of Angels was burning bright, setting the scene for an early night, standing on the edge of tranquility. This was the moment to take in the view, shimmering with the red and the blue, sun going down, the sunset marquee. There were people I knew but never met, masters and maidens that slipped through the net, friends of friends of a certain kind. Talk of the town, a line in the news, in the gallery with a touch of the blues. What you need is a six-blade knife. It's a long way back. It's a long way back to Deptford town. It's a long way back. Such a long way back to Deptford town. If he asks you to go, you can't decline. Putting it down, a line at a time. Don't move too fast, better taking it slow. But time didn't start with the ticking of the clock. Can't get by without a few knocks. One by one, blow by blow. There was smoke and heat in a hotel room, songs from the bud like red perfume, fresh off the shelf. Now they're gone. Could this be heaven by another name? 'Cause nothing now will ever be the same. Depends whose side you're on. It's a long way back, such a long way back to Deptford town. Such a long way back. It's a long way back to Deptford town. From New York City to Monterey, from New Orleans to Frisco Bay. On every street, every town. Out on the highway, on with the show. So much I just didn't know, so I breathed it in, took it down. Felt like a dream. Memories linger in your heart. But life feels short, 'cause time flies. Take a look through a child's eyes. Now's the time to make a new start. 'Cause it's a long way back. It's a long way back to Deptford town. Such a long way back. Long way back to Deptford town. Don't you take me back. Don't you take me back to Deptford town. It's a long way back. It's a long way back to Deptford town.
We were talking earlier on before we came down here about another thing that we both, Dire Straits and Hot As Flowers, had their stint playing in this place in Los Angeles called the Roxy. And you refer to your night in the Roxy in that song, don't you?
Yeah.
The bard with The Perfumed Tale.
Well, yes, the songs from the Bard, like Rare Perfume.
Like Rare Perfume, yeah.
Well, because Bob Dylan was in the audience on the first night we were there, and we were in the bar upstairs, which is called On the Rocks, of course, in the Roxy, if anybody's been there. Actually, you can't go there unless you up to the bar, unless you play there. You get invited up. And anyway, the place was full of celebrities, and of course Bob was there, and he walked up and he said, "That's some sound you've got going there, you boys."
That is some accolade.
Anyway, chatted away to him for a bit, as you do. And he said, I guess you're staying in the Sunset Marquee.
Yes.
And do you want to come back and I'll play some songs for you? I was like, uh-huh.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, so...
do you remember what songs he played?
I've never heard them before or since.
Okay. Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone. They're gone. He probably wrote them that day in the car on the way to the airport.
He was probably writing about 15
but
songs a day.
It was a surreal moment, being in a hotel room with Bob Dylan playing to, I think there was 8 of us in the room.
Yeah.
Mark and him sitting on the couch. Mark just joining in.
Yeah.
2 guitars, a bit like us here.
Yeah.
Working it out as we go along.
Yes.
And it was extraordinary. We was looking at each other going, is this happening?
This is really... What an amazing thing to have happened.
It was extraordinary, yeah. So, that was quite a moment. Yeah. A wonderful moment, yeah.
We had Jackson Browne and Daryl Hannah come into the dressing room afterwards.
No, that's pretty good. That's
pretty good.
That's pretty good.
We had
Rod Stewart.
They didn't come back to the hotel afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, the reason why I wrote this book, in a sense, because we were trying to figure out what we were going to talk about earlier on. But it was a kind of a celebration, really, more than anything else. Not just of us in the band and the fact that we enjoyed the success. Mark and I certainly enjoyed the success a lot. We didn't like the fame bit very much, obviously, because that's difficult to deal with. But it was a celebration, really, of all the other people involved in this Dire Straits kind of story, in a way. The caterers, the lorry drivers, the endless hours that the crew spend taking things down, putting things up, almost no sleep,
Yes,
and incredibly long tours. I mean, we did 2 tours of over 200 dates. One was 240 dates, the other one was 250 or something.
Yeah.
Which is like a year and a half on the road.
Yeah.
I mean,
very tough.
It's crazy. I mean, it's a crazy thing to do, but in some ways, I wanted to try and paint a picture of what it was like to be in that band and experience that and celebrate all the rest of the people that were involved in it. Wow. Thank you. Yeah.
You're enjoying the reaction to the book, I'm sure, as well. Is that it's
rewarding? It's been very, very rewarding. Yeah.
And is there a catharsis as well?
Definitely.
Yeah,
without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, it puts you in your place once you've done that, because that's never going to happen again.
Yes. Yeah.
That will never happen again. And as I spoke, I enjoy just playing in small theatres, just acoustic with some other musicians and. Chatting about the past, and that pleases me immensely.
Yeah.
And I've got contact with the audience again, whereas in the heyday of the Straits, the nearest audience was 30 yards away.
Yes, yeah.
And you rushed off to the hotel, and there's no communication between you and the audience much anymore. It's a bit you're playing a part in a play. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You're part of the Dire Straits play after a while.
Yeah.
And there's a very interesting interview with Alice Cooper about that, of all people.
Right.
He said, when I'm on stage, I'm Alice Cooper. When I'm not on stage, I go and play golf with my mates.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say that reading the book, I wasn't even aware of where you were at in terms of your trajectory when we joined you.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can say for sure is your crew and all of you guys were incredibly kind and gracious to us guys when we did join you. I have very, very happy memories of that time. So thank you for that.
Well, it's a pleasure. Well, I think you learn a lot on the way up, and I think when you're treated well, like we were treated well by the heads, and we were treated well by when we supported other bands. So in a sense, it's a respect. I think musicians should show each other.
Yeah.
in this life.
Can you believe that we've been sitting here for an hour already?
Have we?
It doesn't feel like
I've
it.
been talking too much. And we haven't even started yet.
We haven't even really started. But we'll wait. Is there anything anybody would like to ask, actually, then, seeing as we have an audience here?
What's it like coming down from playing those huge stages and in 92 feeling it's all over? Is it just a big kind of feeling of, oh, is that it?
It's a very good question. That it's very, very difficult coming down from that level of excitement and exposure, and it's actually very difficult to get back into what one would call everyday life, because you've left one family, which is your touring family with the musicians and all the rest of it, which is an incredibly close-knit situation, and has to be, because you are dependent on each other and you're having a hell of a lot of fun. You know, you don't do anything for yourself. Somebody carries your bag. Somebody cleans your clothes. Somebody puts the toothpaste on your toothbrush. I'm joking. But, you know, it's that kind of a life. And you get very, very spoiled. And you come home and you can't even make yourself a cup of coffee. I mean, it's pathetic, really.
It is, yeah.
And it takes you time to adjust, and it takes your family time to adjust back to having you on board again. You can't book a plane ticket. You don't know where to get a cab from. It's pathetic, really. And you have to relearn your life again in a different family. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun, I have to say. I have to admit to that, yeah. Well, it's an incredible thing to do. It's not for everybody, and a lot of people can't take the strain. I mean, David left, he couldn't take it.
Yeah.
And Pick got tired, he couldn't take it.
Yes,
The original players in the band. It's a really hard job, because you have to perform well every time you play in front of an audience, because you're playing in front of an awful lot of people who, A, spend a lot of money. They've spent a long time waiting for you to come on. They parked their car somewhere. The tickets are expensive. They probably got wet because it's rained and you're playing outside, and they're still standing there when you come on, you know. And so we had a rule. We're on stage at 8 o'clock every evening, despite anything else, and we made that a rule. We didn't keep people waiting. And I think we did pretty good shows, you know. And I think you have to, and that's where the discipline thing comes in. I mean, it's a boring word to use when you're talking about rock and roll, but if you haven't got it, it's a mess. We had it. So
You're still in touch with David as well, aren't you?
yeah, from time to time. Yeah.
And he went on to make music, obviously.
He made a lot of records.
Yeah.
And he's still writing now. In fact, actually, it probably was a igniter for him to leave the band. It wasn't a happy situation.
No.
It was just getting difficult.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I speak about that in the book. I don't go into too many details
Yeah.
because it would be too
It's personal.
distasteful, I
Yes,
think.
yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, how apt is Dire Straits' name, considering you got on with it so well?
What was that? Sorry, what?
How apt is Dire Straits as a name, seeing as you got on with each other so well?
Oh, it's just a name. It's just a name. It came about, I don't know, I've told this story many times, but it came about because when Pick joined us in the early days, we weren't even called Dire Straits, we were called the Cafe Racers. The first gig we did was as the Cafe Racers, because we didn't have a name.
Yeah.
And it was an old band that Mark and I were playing with. And Pick went back to his digs in North London, and Pick was really the only professional musician amongst us. The rest of us were amateurs, really, just mucking about. And one of his friends said, well, because Pick said we're trying to find a name for this band I'm playing with. And he said, why don't you call it Dire Straits? Because you've been a professional musician all your life and you've never made any money. And that was it. And it's still spelt wrong by people. It's still spelt with the GH in it.
I saw there's a photograph in the book of isn't there a ticket stub or a poster or something?
The poster with Dire Straits.
Yeah.
It was a £1.
Yes, £1 in.
It was £1 to get into. I think it was the tram shed or somewhere.
Right.
I can't remember.
Very good. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us today, and it's been lovely for me to catch up with you after all these
great.
years.
Yeah, it's great to play together too.
It's lovely to play together.
Yeah.
We'll do more of it sometime. With any bit of
Absolutely.
luck.
Yeah.
Shall we do one more before we go?
Okay.
But can I, if you're interested in music and in humanity and in empathy and in someone with a great heart, which I believe this man is, this book is a great read. So check it out. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. A note from my publisher. Right.
Right then.
Better play this one, I suppose. This is about a rock and roll band that was Mark and David saw in a pub in Greenwich in 1976, I think it was. And we've all been to pubs where there's a poor band sitting in the corner playing away and everybody ignoring them. So this one was, I call the Sultans of Swing.
You get a shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime, south of the river you stop, you hold everything. The band is playing Dixie, double 4 time. You feel alright when you hear the music ring. Well, you step inside, you don't see too many faces. Coming out of the rain, hear the jazz go down. Competition in other places. Yes, and the horns are blowing that sound. Way on down south, way on down south in London town. Check out Guitar George, he knows all them chords. Man, his strictly rhythm doesn't make you cry or sing. There's an old guitar, it's all he can afford. Gets under the lights to do his thing. And Harry doesn't mind if he doesn't make the scene. He's got a daytime job and he's doing alright. He can play that honky-tonk just like anything. Saving it up for Friday night with the Sultans. Yeah, we're the Sultans of Swing. Now there's a crowd of young boys, they're fooling around in the corner. They're dressed in baggies and their platform soles. They don't give a damn about any trumpet playing band. Ain't what they call rock and roll. And the Sultans, yeah, the Sultans, they play Creole. Yeah, Creole blues. Steps right up to the microphone. Said it fast as does the time bell ring. Good night, thank you. Now it's time to go home. Said it fast with one last thing. We are the Sultans. We are the Sultans of Swing. All right.
Back now.
John Ilsley, thank you very much.
Thank you.